Hello again, my lovely Scotsman. How you doing?
Well, hello, hello. I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed. Good to be here.
Okay, so we are doing John 11 through 14:14, and there's a lot in here. We're starting out with Lazarus.
Mm. And it grabbed me straight away. Well, in verse 5. So apologies to verses 1 to 4. You mean a lot to me, but not this time. So verse 5, Jesus loved Martha and his sister and Lazarus. So when he heard Lazarus was ill, what did he do? He stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said, let's go back to Judea. It's just weird. He loved them so much that he did nothing.
Right.
But that speaks to me. God's got a plan. He's got a plan in his perfect timing. Because we're going, come on, Lazarus is ill. Go now. Go on. Read the story. And he's going, no, my timing.
Yeah.
And incidentally, you never read in the Bible that Jesus ran for something, arriving out of breath and apologizing because he was late. He arrives exactly when he needs to.
It's interesting because my husband will say that being early is being on time, which is not me. And yet I don't feel like Jesus is saying you have to be on time. It's like you walk in the rhythms of what God is dictating to you, and that's on time. And sometimes you have some technical difficulties, which we just recently experienced, where
Indeed.
things that move along and change the trajectory, even if you are on time and you are prepared, things can go wrong. So I do think it's in his timing, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do have something before verse 5, poor verses 1 to
Oh.
4. I thought it was really interesting in 11:2, Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume, wiped his feet. Now we get to this in John, a couple chapters later or whatever, but John 12:3. I thought it was really interesting that John chose to foreshadow that. Like he's saying, this is the same Mary and John's gospel is written much later than the others. It seems like he's reflecting back on his life and saying, oh yeah, actually it would be good if we had a record of this. You get different tidbits than you would had you written it before. And there's the synoptic gospels, meaning that those are much more similar and John's a little bit different. So I just thought it was interesting that he foreshadows 12:3 by saying this is the same Mary, is that the Mary that anointed, and there's a lot of Marys here, so it's relevant actually, I think.
Yeah. I wonder if it's as he's piecing together his memories and the memories that everyone is discussing. Maybe he's got lots of, whether you had post-its in ye olde days, but he's got lots of post-its all over on his whiteboard and saying, now, what do I remember and what's the correct order that it should be set out in? And maybe he said, this is Mary. I've mentioned her already.
Before we go a little further, I have another little wrinkle here. 8, he says, let us go back to Judea again, which you referenced. And then the disciples are like, they were trying to stone you and you want to go back there? And then there's this whole other thing about Lazarus falling asleep. And then Thomas, we jump down to 16. Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him, which sounds completely melodramatic and like, let's go that we will die with him,
Yeah.
which is sort of silly. But what he's talking about is he hasn't been fussed about whether Lazarus is sleeping or dead or whatever. He's just saying, we're headed to Judea and they're going to stone us. So, okay, throw down, let's go, boys. But he's not concerned about that inner part. And so this weird statement of let us go and die with the Lord sounds so melodramatic, and yet it actually echoes up to verse 8. It's almost like John was taking the post-it notes and said, oh yeah, Thomas said this, and put that bit there.
Yeah, interesting. And that it would be Thomas, the so-called doubting Thomas.
Right. That says, let's go. It's kind of interesting. All right, sorry. So carrying on from, do you have anything? I have a couple bits over from 20.
Yeah, go for it. My story in John 11:35 is my next.
Okay. Yeah. So I just found it interesting that Jesus stays on the edge of the village. He arrives in Bethany. Martha goes to him, and the story of Mary and Martha, I don't know that we've heard that yet because we're reading backwards, but Martha's the busy one and Mary sits and listens to the Lord. And then Martha's like, get her up and have her help me. She's not helping. And Jesus is like, what she's doing is the good thing and it will not be taken away from her. Which again, I'm Spoiler alert, right? But what's funny to me is their personalities haven't changed. And Jesus is not innately rebuking Martha for doing. He's rebuking Martha's rebuke of Mary because Mary is seeking after the good thing, which is the intimacy with the Lord. It's not that the things don't still need to be done. And I think that's really powerful. Like, so here we have just this little mini reminder. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. So she gets up and she goes out and she does it. And then she goes back to tell her sister, the teacher's asking for you. But you don't hear Jesus say that to Martha. But, we assume that because that's what Martha then says, is that the teacher is here and he's calling for you. And then Mary, she's sitting evidently in her grief and jumps up and runs to get him, and everybody thinks she's going to the tomb. So I just think it's kind of an interesting echo of the same thing where their personalities haven't changed. And yet Martha's not rebuking her sister anymore. She goes to help her. She goes to say, hey, he's asking for you.
Yeah. And Jesus doesn't rebuke her ever again, basically, that's recorded in scripture. He doesn't, next time he sees him, he doesn't say, you're not helping, go and help your sister.
Right. Right. No, he
He,
doesn't.
he accepts her for who she is and sort of affirms her in her character.
Yeah. All right, on to 35.
35, the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. But what strikes me, well, I say strikes me, it was a friend of mine that pointed this out to me. It's conjecture, take it as you will. Jesus, he knows everything. He is part of the Trinity. He knows what heaven is like. He knows what it is like to be one with the Father. He knows what it's like to be with the Father and the Holy Spirit. I mean, together they created everything. And now, and he knows that Lazarus is dead. He knows that Lazarus therefore has gone to heaven. And now he, Jesus, is about to call back his friend from that place, from that community, that communion with God. No wonder Jesus wept, realizing the loss that Lazarus was about to feel. I was there, I was with the Father, and now I'm back.
It's an interesting perspective on it. I really like that. And that this is a plug for scripture memorization. You got 2 words, Jesus wept, and you have memorized.
Yes.
And it's harder to remember that it's John 11:35. But apart from that, then you'll have some scripture memorized.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can, I'm jumping on to 49 for some prophecy memorized.
Yes. Well, I had the other thing that I found in this reading, and Carmen talked about this, and I think Heather did too. You read the Bible, okay, I've got the basics. But there's so much you miss. It's so dense. It's so much text. It's even when you've been studying it for years, sometimes you read something and think, I don't remember that. And I found it interesting that in this whole exchange, as we're surrounding Jesus wept, in 33, he was greatly disturbed in spirit. Then he weeps. Again, you're making conjecture about his motivation, but I think you got a solid case there. And then in 38, then Jesus again greatly disturbed. And I've been on this kick with having a word to word version and a phrase for phrase version and reading both and us needing both. And I went and checked, and there it says he's angry. And I kind of, again, your case for saying he's angry that Lazarus is getting wrenched back, maybe. I don't know. I just found it funny that he's angry. And here in this particular version that I'm looking at, it says greatly disturbed. But it's like, okay, why? What, like somebody dying? That's sad. That's something that gives you grief. It's something that we accept on this side of the cross and on this side of heaven as inevitable, as it's just going to happen. People are going to die. And yet in these verses, it'll say, greater things are that we will do when he leaves us. And so I kind of go, okay, well, maybe we're not just supposed to accept that. Maybe you would go with some righteous indignation and raise someone from the dead.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, grief is for those who are left behind. Grief is for us on our side of it. Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, she once said, grief is the price you pay for love. Wow.
That's a good one. All right. So take us into the prophecy.
Yeah, prophecy in 49, when Caiaphas, who was high priest at the time, says, do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. Now, he is meaning, I think it's best if we kill Jesus. And everyone, and us who are Christians who are benefiting from this are going, yeah, it was better that Jesus died for us than all of us dying as well. It's just, I don't think Caiaphas realized the enormity of what he was saying.
Well, and he's the arch villain saying it, as
Yeah.
opposed to those of us who are looking and saying, yes, the one sacrifice saves us all. I also thought it was interesting that above that in 48, he says, they are talking, this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. But oh gosh, that would be horrible. But their motivation, obviously Nicodemus that Carmen and I talked about, is a good example where you think he's maybe on the team, he's trying to figure this out. He's asking good questions as opposed to challenging only. And so it says, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation. And I think some of them had the right motivation. They were saying, well, this isn't going to be a good thing. Obviously, they're not believing that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Messiah. And so they're not thinking that, but they're sort of saying, you are going to create a revolution here that is going to be problematic for us with the authorities. Now, at this point, yeah, you need to go get in trouble with the authorities. This is a conscientious objection, to quote Bonhoeffer, I think. But anyway, yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny where they're like, we better stop this. Same vein as Caiaphas.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'm going into 12.
Yep. John 12:1.
You go for it.
Okay, so John 12:1, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where that Lazarus lived, with whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Just a passing detail. So this is 6 days before Passover. It's 6 days before Jesus is executed. This is his last Sabbath. He's 6 days away from the crown of thorns, the flogging, the nails, 6 days away from the sin bearing. What does he want? He wants the warmth and affection of dear friends. He wants the fellowship of being with people. I just thought it's just, in all his godliness, it's just a lovely human touch.
That is very true. I love down in 9 where it says, but also to see Lazarus. And I have a little note like, okay, so you're not necessarily going to see Jesus. You're looking for Jesus. Maybe you've seen him once preach, maybe not, maybe whatever. But wouldn't you go to Lazarus and what was it like? I'm going to make a bizarre reference here, but and a very ungodly one. But to quote JT in movies, the Superman movie, when they raise Superman from the dead, Lois says to him, what was it like? And Superman's reply is itchy. Like, that's so funny because wouldn't you be asking that? Well, Lazarus, what was it like? And there are lots of people that, even if they themselves haven't had the near death experience, but there's a lot of research around those. I would say, probably overarching, this is me being contemplating, I have no idea. My sense is most of the near death experiences give an indication of a loving God, and that, well, I didn't want to come back kind of thing. So, but you'd have those questions for Lazarus.
Talking of questions, just going back into verse 3 there, loads of questions for Mary. What were you doing? What were you doing? So Mary took about half a liter of pure nard, an expensive perfume, poured it on Jesus' feet, wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Such a detailed description of what she did. And it strikes me that God enjoys the details of a person's sacrifice and devotion to him because it means something to him, not because he's thinking, yeah, bow down and worship me. That's what I need, whatever. He doesn't need that. We need to worship rather than he needs our worship. But God remembers everything that you do in his name. And then still on that, why nard? Why would Mary take about half a liter of pure nard? So nard is a perfume. It's a gift for a king because it has value, and that was appropriate because Jesus is about to show himself as the King of Israel through his triumphant or triumphal entry into Jerusalem. But nard was a ritual in anointing a priest. Priests were anointed. Jesus is the royal priest about to make atonement for his people. But nard was also used to anoint the dead for burial. So he said that he must die. Mary has done all this as an act of faith and devotion in him, and anointing him as king, royal priest, and about to die. Astonishing. And last point in verse 3, how can you get so much stuff in one verse? So the house is filled with the fragrance of perfume. So Jesus has been anointed with the perfume, and that's often overlooked. Mary anoints Jesus with perfume. Perfume is fragrant. It has a scent. It smells beautiful and sweet and distinct. Mary is pointing attention to Jesus because the next day, wherever he goes, people will smell that fragrance. And you don't smell somebody's perfume and look away. You smell somebody's perfume and you look to them. Oh, what's that scent? This is calling attention to Jesus. Jesus was not going hidden, he was going large.
Well, and it draws it away from her act. It's not
Mm,
about what she did. It's about the fact that the perfume gives the attention to him. I mean, this is her own home where she's doing this, and yet it has these lasting impacts that bring attention to him separately.
good point. Yeah.
So in 12, I have another random note. Well, two random notes. In 16, his disciples did not understand these things at first. But when Jesus was glorified, they remembered. And it's just so we have this post-event perspective where we can look backwards and go, well, why didn't you get it? I would have been like, so right there with Peter, just saying. And then I love in 20, now among those who went up to worship the festival were some Greeks. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and said to him, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip went and told Andrew. Then Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. Jesus answered them. And then he goes on, did the Greeks ever get to see him? Did he talk to them? Like, we have this random insertion of Greeks. And I wonder, and this is my little moment, we've read Paul, and Paul is
Mhm.
eventually in Athens and saying there's an idol to an unknown God. Let me tell you about that God. And Paul is amazing at using that. Were there questions? It says Greeks, some Greeks. Were they from Corinth? Were they from Thessalonica? They're seeking him. They've gone to Israel to seek him. And maybe they were Jewish, maybe they were there for Passover. Who knows? We don't have more information. But basically, again, just like all of the Bible. Well, what's the rest of the story? Did they get to meet him?
Unclear to John 13:19.
Okay. So 42. Nevertheless, many of the authorities believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess it. And this is the thing of, are you worried about what someone else is going to say? It doesn't matter. You have to walk your now. Were those they fear of being put out of the synagogue is why they were walking, talking, and believing in the Messiah that their entire nation has been waiting for this man, and they won't confess it because they're afraid. It's just sort of a
Mm,
sad commentary on where we are in life and when we're not willing to stand up for things that we believe in.
yeah.
And then again, 13:8, Peter, wash my whole body, Lord. I just love this
Eh,
guy. I'm so like fist bump, dude. Like I'm there with you. It's no, no, no. You can't ever wash my feet. Well, if I don't wash it, you're not. Yeah, okay. Give me a shower. It's so ridiculous. It so blurts out the inappropriate thing. I'm so there. I'm so
Yeah.
on that page.
He is such a man of extremes. Is a absolutely not. Right. Well, absolutely yes. Is never sort of anywhere in the middle.
Right. And I do feel like that's the one thing before you go to 19. We take the specific and apply it to the general, and then we take the general and vice versa. And plenty of Christian circles, there have been people that have done feet washing. It's kind of a weird thing. We wear shoes, which then means we're not in contact with the earth and we're not feeling the Schumann resonance. And I could go on there. I won't bunny trail there. But the point is, most of us don't need our feet washed. Or if we do, then we throw sneakers in the washing machine. But here, the idea of washing feet is Jesus talking about serving others. Now, is it bad to wash someone's feet? Of course not. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying he's taking an example from his era and his time, because they were all wearing sandals and this was what was done, to an overarching serve your brothers and sisters, help them, be kind to them, do acts of goodwill. And all over the Old Testament, serve the poor. Right? If your feet are dirty and you need some help, if you need a new washing machine and I wanted to buy an extra and I have one, help. So this is again the taking the general and putting it on the specific, or taking the specific and putting it onto the general. And we, as humans, being sheep, get that confused a lot.
Mm.
Over to 19.
John 13, verse 19, where Jesus says, I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. And there's that careful choice of words there. I am who I am. Compare that with Exodus 3:14, when God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you're to tell the Israelites. I am has sent you. So Jesus is clearly saying, guys, this is a big moment.
Carry on, because I only have one other little note in.
And that's me for John 13. I'm now on to John 14, 2 and 4.
Go for it.
Okay, so on that one, uh, verses 2 to 4 are, my Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. You know the place to where I'm going. So Jewish tradition, the son, once engaged, goes back to his father's house and builds an extra room on his father's house, an extension. If he's a great carpenter, maybe it's a complete apartment. If he's not, maybe it's just an outhouse. Who knows? But the point being, he builds this extra room. Then he would marry his fiancée and take her back there to the extra room that he's built. And in the meantime, he would leave a gift, a symbol of his betrothal, until such time as he had prepared that room. Nowadays, for us, the engagement is, and the gift is usually an engagement ring. Jesus left us, the bride of Christ, an engagement gift, the Holy Spirit, and he's gone to prepare a room for us. He's setting out in a context that the people of the day would absolutely have understood.
Brilliant. Yeah. I have something in 8. Are you done with John? You got more in John 14?
I don't want to be so finite, but yeah, I'm done with John. I'm so done with John.
Well, we have a lot more to go. It does surprise me. And again, this is the whole thing about reading backwards. We're in the parts that have more in a shorter space, I think, than, I mean, Paul is so thick with dense and just meaty that you can't go but 3 or 4 verses before there's, and then you end up like highlighting your whole entire book. But I love when in 8, Carmen and I talked about this a lot with the Old Testament. Just tell us, and the New Testament too. It was, they were constantly renewing their covenant in the Old Testament. And we're going to jump over to Second Chronicles in just a second. But Pharisees, just tell us if you're the Messiah. He's like, I did. I told you I was the Messiah. And then Philip, which is one of his disciples, Lord, show us the Father and we'll be satisfied. And he has to be exasperated at a certain point. Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Like, what are you not getting here? And he again, but no judgment on Philip. I'd have totally been there too. And here's the echo of the greater things that I had mentioned earlier in 12. Will also do greater things than these, because I am going to the Father, the one who believes in me. So if you believe in Jesus, you have the power to raise the dead. I don't think that we're living in that very well at this point. Just, now, again, is that necessary for your faith in Jesus? Of course not. No. But if he says that, greater things than these, Philip gets translated. Like, maybe I should work on that. Now, obviously, I should be doing what God wants me to do and not necessarily like what I'm fascinated by, or if he's not directing me in that particular place. But I just find it kind of curious. All right.
Yeah.
So we have just this last little bit of Second Chronicles 34 through 36.
Go for it. I've got 1 to 3 and 8. It's just echoing what you've done before, which is working out the time. Because it says Josiah was 8 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem for 31 years. He did what was right in the Lord, followed the ways of his father, not turning aside left or right. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. And then in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places and Asherah poles and idols. And then it says in the 18th year of Josiah's reign, he went to purify the land and the temple. So he was 8 years old when he was crowned. He was 16 when he sought God, when he came to faith. He was 20 when he began to purge Judah of the idols. You can imagine, he's been king since he's 8, but he's been a kid. 20 is when you're bulked up. You can for want of a better expression, start throwing your weight around and have a physical presence. And then he's 26 when he arranges the repair of the temple, when he gets a bit of, it's not just destroy the bad, but it's rebuild the good as well. So just a timeline thought.
Alrighty, moving on to verse 14. And then we have a very famous verse coming up here
We
for us.
have, but you have to say, spoiler.
Yeah. In 14, they find the book of the law, and the priest Hilkiah finds it and then brings it to the king. And so, verse 19, when the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. It's not 2 Kings 22:11. What? It is an echo. It is a repeat entirely in its entirety of 2 Kings 22. Is 2 Chronicles 9 34:19 is the same verse. They react, oh my goodness, we've screwed up here badly. And in the same vein of verses, I was reading different verses. There's a big difference between the king writing his own copy of the book of the law and a difference between the king having a book of the copy of the law written in his presence. But this reaction of, I've so screwed up. This is not good. We need to fix this now is for me how I came to Christ. I came to the realization, and this is Manasseh, and he finally knew that the Lord is God.
And I get that, the dichotomy between, did the king read it himself or was it read in his presence? Throughout literary stuff, for example, Elspeth and I, over the summer, we went to Hexham and Hexham Abbey. You can go down into the crypt, which is St. Wilfrid's crypt from AD 645. And it's St. Wilfrid's crypt. It's an Anglo-Saxon crypt. It's St. Wilfrid's. Okay, did Wilfrid build it himself? Was he a stonemason? I thought he was a man of books and letters. I didn't realize he was a stonemason. No, but it was built under his authority, and therefore it's known as his crypt. But he didn't build it physically. He may have ordered it, may have instructed, whatever. So yeah, I get that.
Alrighty. I have only one other note in 35, and Huldah the prophet. What? Who's Huldah the prophet? It's just obviously someone that was important in this time frame. She's the wife of Shallum, son of Tokath, son of Hashra, keeper of the wardrobe. But they go and seek this prophetess. I know of Hannah. Deborah was a judge, but I had never. Who's the prophet Huldah? I just thought it was just a random. Like, wait, more information, please, Lord.
Yeah, yeah. In 2 Chronicles 35, verses 20 to 24. So in that, essentially, don't get involved in other people's fights. Proverbs 26:17 says, like one who grabs a stray dog by the ears is someone who rushes into a quarrel that's not their own. So in 2 Chronicles 35, Josiah has set the temple in order. Well done, Josiah. Good bit of work there. Necho, the king of Egypt, went up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates. Josiah marched out to meet him in battle. And Necho sends messengers to say, what quarrel is there between us? Why are you coming to fight me? And Josiah, however, would not be turned away from him. So much so that Josiah disguises himself in order to engage in battle. He would not listen to Necho, who said that at God's command he went to fight him on the plain of Megiddo. What happens? Archers shoot King Josiah. He tells his officers, take me away, I'm badly wounded. So they took him out of his chariot, put him in another chariot, brought him to Jerusalem, where he died. He got involved in somebody else's battle, the result being he died. Don't get involved in other people's fights.
Well, and I find it amazing that it says he did not listen to the words of Necho from the mouth of God. And did he think that Necho was lying? Was there intrigue involved? Again, need more information. I got questions, Lord. Not bad questions, not a challenge, but was there something more here? Was there a background here that we like? It is sort of weird. Later on, we're about to get there. King Cyrus says, God's done this for me, or God tells me, well, do you really believe in God, Cyrus? Where's this come? Where's your motivation? So Necho, who knows? But he does say, like, I don't have any beef with you. Back off. I'm going over here to Carchemish. And Josiah will not listen.
Yeah.
And dies.
So 2 to 5, it's more counting. Jehoahaz was 23 when he became king. He was king for 3 months and then he's deposed. And when Eliakim was made king, he was renamed Jehoiakim. He was 25 when he became king. So that means that Josiah and the people already knew that Joachim was not fit to be their king, because Eliakim, who became known as Jehoiakim, he was the older brother of Jehoaz. So they'd already overlooked him and said, "You're not fit to be king. We're going for your little brother." Then he ends up that he does get to be king. Yeah, it's just interesting when you count back and see the different years, and
Well, and
it
I
doesn't all
think
happen in a rush.
I might put a link to a TikTok video. I don't know this content creator, and I'm not necessarily endorsing her, but it was a really interesting TikTok video, so just a couple minutes long. But it was talking about the connections between the people and how long Adam lived, and when Shem was around, and who connect, and so it's like a whole bunch of stuff happens, and actually it's only handed through 4 guys. You and I have said this before. You think that it happens right away. You just go trucking through it because we're reading it day after day. And yet, actually, some of this stuff had timelines to it that are not. The information is there. I don't have extra questions because God tells me if I read this entire book and I figure and I use the calculations and I figure all this out, I have more information. I'm just not paying attention to it. But I do find that significant in the fact that there's timelines here and there's information, and we often just blow past it because we're not
Yeah.
patient.
Yep. And a clear example of that is in general in 1 Chronicles 35, sorry, 2 Chronicles 36, where if you look at everything that's happened, it can read as a very quick skim, but it must have taken time. Josiah rebuilds the temple. 2 kings later, Nebuchadnezzar empties the temple. The next king, Zedekiah, defiles the temple himself. And then Nebuchadnezzar then sets fire to the temple, breaks down the city walls, and then Cyrus became king and he allows its repair. So you've got this disintegration, this downward slope, downward trajectory of what's happening. And you think, bam, 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 it happened. But it probably happened over a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of, as we move into First Chronicles, do you have anything else for 36 or for Second Chronicles?
No, I don't. And
Okay.
why am I grinning? Because you're having to read 1 Chronicles. Sorry.
It was so bad. You guys, I'm not kidding. Shem, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serug, Nahor, Terah, Abram. That is Abraham. That one I know because I know the line of Abraham. But the rest of this, it took 3 to 4 times as long to record this. And I don't know that I got them all right. I tried very hard. I stopped. I listened to other people. I enunciated. I said, well, Lord told me to go read the Bible. And I said, okay, Lord, yes, I will obey. I will video cast the Bible. I've read half of it at this point, right? We're on the 11th of January. I've read over half and the Apocrypha. This was the hardest thing. Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
I
I can try and get,
go ahead.
I'll try and give you some comfort if I can, which is throughout 1 Chronicles, all the way 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And yeah, I feel your pain, but it's a long list of names. Everyone, what it shows is that everyone is known to God. Everyone is important to him. And these are, there are not just names, there's snippets of information about the individuals, about the families and the tribes, not just a list of names. Something is known about them, which again goes to show that they are important to him. It's not just a name, it's a person, whatever. So well
Yeah.
done and getting through it.
Yes. Thank you. So do you have anything before 11?
No, just in 1 Chronicles 11 itself. 2021 is my next.
Okay, so before that, I wanted to point out this is again this whole naming thing, same theme here. 11. I love David's mighty warriors, but Jashabim, son of Hechmoni, right? Well, in 2 Samuel 23, 8-12, we have a different, like he is the Techmonite. So there's a T instead of an H, and his name is changed. And so this is kind of part of why this stuff is both so important and so challenging, in that in one place in the Bible it says one thing, and it's like, okay, Tachmonite, Hatchmonite, tomato. We know what we're talking about, right? So I think that it's the same dude. And I did a bunch of research on David's mighty men and which ones were which. One of my favorites is Joab. I really like Joab. Joab is a hard ass. He deals, my goodness, and he doesn't have a pleasant end. Solomon has Benaniah hack him down on, but I'm spoiler alerting. In all of my research with the mighty men, the three, and it sounds like, so the story is in verse 18. Then the three broke through the camp of the Philistines and drew water from the well of Bethlehem. And then David won't drink it because men have died to get him this water, which is
Yeah.
probably the appropriate response. But then you're like, dude, people died, drink it. You kind of like go back and forth. But I think David made the right decision. But the three, so this is relatively early in the story of David's mighty men, and so they get called the three, which is really interesting to me. Yeah.
Well, what it says in 2021, Abishai, the brother of Joab, your man Joab, was chief of the three, and he raised his spear against 300, blah, blah, blah. He was doubly honored above the three and became their commander, even though he was not included among them. For those of a literary bent who know the story of D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas, I wonder if this is where Dumas got his inspiration from, because D'Artagnan was the leader of the Three Musketeers, but D'Artagnan himself was not one of the three. That was Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, just the same as there's the three here.
Interesting. Yeah. I know that's yes, exactly. Well, and what I find about, I mean, was he just not around? Was he doing something else when the three are like, he wants water. Let's, and these are strapping warrior men that are pretty lethal. And so they decide, beating their chests, and I'm going to go do the thing. They break through the Philistines. All they're doing is getting some water, but they had two of them have to fend off the Philistines and kill a bunch of them as they're getting this water out. I wonder if Abishai just wasn't there, and Abishai would have totally been there for the, and would have been like, yeah, I'll go, but he just didn't happen to be around or something. I don't know. I just find it funny. But he does become then the leader of them.
And of that, can I jump into 1 Chronicles 12,
Yep.
19?
Please.
So, and again, this harks back to what you're saying about a different telling of the story of how when the king read the book of the law, he tore his clothes. In the same way, 1 Chronicles 12:19 says some of the tribe of Manasseh defected to David when he went with the Philistines to fight against Saul. And then in brackets, there's one sentence in brackets. He and his men did not help the Philistines because after consultation, their rulers sent him away. Sorry, it's 2 sentences. They said it will cost us our heads if he deserts to his master Saul. So 2 sentences in brackets, but the whole of that story is told, the full story at length in 1 Samuel 29, all about the Philistines rejecting David and David saying, look, I'm with you guys. Why do you not trust me?
Right. Yeah. Well, in so much of this, all of this, so we finished Second Chronicles, we're into First Chronicles, but we're going to do the whole thing again with First Kings and Second Kings. And yet I feel like we've talked about so much of this because there are echoes in Paul, and he's talking about a story or referencing something, even the Maccabees. I feel like we've been back and forth and all over the book, and yet we haven't read this yet. We just read it this week. And so you go, well, wait a minute, what? But this is the human condition. We need to hear it again and again and again and again and again because we're sheep.
Well, I'll go back a bit first. In 1 Chronicles 13:1, just again in passing, David conferred with each of his officers, the commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds. So he confers with them. He's not saying, I'm your leader, I've got all the ideas, I will tell you what's going on. Have a look in Proverbs 15:22. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. David is just doing what wisdom of Proverbs says. In verse 3, he says, let us bring the ark of our God back to us, for we did not inquire of it during the reign of Saul. There's an acknowledgement there by David of there was a failing and how to correct it. But also, again, I did the Beth special, looked at the different translations where it says we did not inquire of it. In other translations, it's we neglected it.
Ooh,
And
that's a good one.
sometimes it's we neglected him. We didn't pay attention to the things of God as well as God himself. Then in 9:11, yeah, he would come to Uzzah. So when they came to the threshing floor of Kidon, Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark because the oxen stumbled. Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and he struck him down. They'd been told so many times in Exodus, in Deuteronomy, in Joshua, how to carry the ark and how not to, and who could approach the ark and who should not. The fact that only the Levite priests should do that. So Uzzah and Aho, sons of Adinadab,
Right? It's not
the
easy.
names. I feel your pain back in the Chronicles. So they do this. They get struck down. David was afraid of the Lord. I mean, for a start, he has an outbreak of anger against the Lord. He calls the place Perez Uzzah, meaning an outbreak against Uzzah. So he's saying, God, why did you strike down Uzzah? That's just not fair. God's saying, well, I warned you so many times. And
Right?
the ark is special. But David then was afraid of God. And we've talked before about the fear of the Lord is not knees knocking together, scary, trembling fear. It is just this awesome majesty fear of the God. David has scary, trembly, weak-kneed fear of God because he gives up. He leaves the ark there with Obed-Edom, whose family is then blessed by it and through it. And you think, well, question, did Obed-Edom have a choice? Did David say, Obed, my good mate, I'm proposing to leave the ark in your back garden. Are you okay with that? I'm thinking Obed-Edom is just told, it's landing here, tough. You
Good
have
luck.
to look after it.
Yeah.
And then he gets blessed inadvertently through it anyway.
Well, and to do a little foreshadow, you mentioned this to me that in 16, then he is listed as one of the Levites. That it says, here we go again Zechariah, Jael, Sheremoth, Jehiel, Methiah, Eliah, Benaniah, Obed Edom, and Jael with harps and lyres. So he actually has Obed Edom come and take a position in the singers and Levites later on. So not only was Obed Edom's house blessed, but he also then gets a position.
Yeah. 1 Chronicles 14.
Yes.
So we've talked about plans on their own will fail, but with many advisors they'll be good. In verses 8 to 12, when the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all Israel, they went up in force against him. David heard about this, and David, he says, verse 10, so David inquired of God, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? The Lord answers, go, and I will deliver them into your hands. So unlike the business of the ark and Obed-Edom and just doing it, David actually asks God what to do, receives an answer, acts accordingly, wins a decisive victory. And notice also that the Philistines abandoned their gods and David burned them. I mean, okay, the ark is not a god, so he's not making excuses for David in not bringing the ark into the city. But at least David gave it over to Obed-Edom for safekeeping. He didn't just abandon it. He basically said, look after this thing. Yeah, because in verse 12, the Philistines had abandoned their gods there, and David gave orders to burn them in the fire.
Indeed. There's a foreshadowing there of Hophni and Phinehas and Samuel and how the ark gets taken by the Philistines and the god of Dagon, but I won't do the spoiler. Because we do have one more little note here, Michael and her spite.
1 Chronicles 15, verse 29. As the ark of the covenant of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, watched from a window. This is David's wife. And when she saw King David dancing and celebrating, she despised him in her heart. It's just so sad that she could not enjoy the joy of her husband. If you're not the one who waves flags, dances at the front of church, kneels down, lies down in prayer and worship during the praise songs, are you uncomfortable? Do you look down on those who do? Sometimes people have a different way of interpreting, a different way of worshiping. Um, Sometimes it's noted that, the way, it's just almost each to their own. If you are worshiping God in your heart, you're worshiping God. Um, and I wonder if Micah was the the foreshadower of true Presbyterian Church of Scotland. Having been Church of Scotland, I can say this sort of thing, sort of, we'll have none of this jollity around here, King David. I'd like just a somber march, if you don't mind. It's like,
Yes.
it's sometimes say, when you want to ask in a charismatic church who wants coffee, you say hands down for a cup of coffee, because everyone's got their hands up anyway. And maybe that's just David. He's hands up. He's going, this is God we're talking about. Yay.
You're going to cheer at a football match,
Yes.
football meaning soccer. Go Berwick Rangers. Go Callum. If you're going to cheer at a football match and you're going to get all jubilant, why wouldn't you do that in church? But it is about the respect of others. Some people have a very, very quiet, they don't even want to stand when the singing happens. They just want to be much more internal in that presence. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's also nothing wrong with going crazy and being like, whoa, Lord. So, yes, loving and respecting each other, which is what the new commandment that Jesus gave it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
On that note, lovely cantor, Mr. Pitt, see you again.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. We'll be back.